Chapter 13. The End of the Journey? They were taken to the medical building, where they were poked, prodded, x-rayed, and blood was removed. Afterward, they discussed why it was necessary. Greg says, "You know why. They want to make sure we haven't brought back anything from outer space." George says, "How could we? We were not out of the ship at any time." Greg says, "Well, look at the captain and how he's acting. Personally, I think it is only the results of the fall and his trying to get out of the coma. I think he is imagining reasons why he can't." Pete asks, "Doesn't anyone remember the time the ship was on the other side of the black hole? Did anyone other than me feel strange while we were out there?" George answers, "I don't know. I always feel strange in different places." Greg says, "I think what we felt was a change of the gravity for a few seconds." Pete says, "I've felt that before, but this was different." Greg says, "Listen, don't go all crazy on me. We can find something strange any new place we go. Stop all thoughts of something like that." The next morning they were taken to see Commander Brown. He was in his office. He greeted them with smiles and said, "I hope you had a comfortable night." They all said they did, but Greg added, "It would have been better if we had known how the captain was doing. That is one of the reasons I asked you to join me. He was operated on last night. They found a lot of old blood from the wound and removed it. The wound is not bleeding now. They will keep him in a coma for a day or two. He seems to still be having these dreams or nightmares, but they don't seem to be as harsh as when you brought him back." He looked at Greg and asked, "Greg, do you feel like answering a few questions?" Greg said, "Not really. I don't want to, but I will. It will be better to get it out and over with." He smiled and said, "That's what I expected you to say. My first question is, there are a lot of recordings of Jim talking to you. It seems you are answering him, and yet it isn't really your voice." Greg says, "I was right there for most of it. I was not answering him, or was I the voice of the blackbird or any of the other voices? We just recorded it. I also wrote down every word. It was hard at times as he spoke so fast. It was like he had many voices in his head. The others will agree with me. We discussed it many times, and none of us understood it." Al says, "It seemed he used my voice most, except Greg. But more than the others, it is my personal feeling that some of that was from conversations we had on the way to the black hole." "What do you mean?" asked Commander Brown. Al says, "One of the things I told everyone was about a young boy being knocked down by a bully and his face being ground into the ground by the bully's foot. There was also discussion of why there weren't doors closer to the control room, but we agreed that because of the height of the ship, it would be hard." George says, "I hadn't thought of it before, but there was a conversation about how blackbirds were taking over the corn crops in a couple of states." Commander Brown says, "This is helpful. Dr. Michael said he thought this was coming from memories. I'll let him know." Greg asks, "Then it's probably not an alien having taken over his body?" Commander Brown says, "I'm sorry. I should have told you that they were 95% sure that they can rule that out. Right now, that part of the trip will be redacted from public records, but will remain in his health record, protected from public review. We will have a public announcement later. I will send you a copy as soon as it's ready and time for your output back to me." Greg says, "I want it on record that I was not any of the voices on those records, except when I was asking him how he was doing and trying to wake him. From the time we got him in bed, he went into the coma. It was like he was reading a book and speaking all the characters himself. It was me who was trying to wake him after we were back on this side of the black hole. I thought he was out of the coma, but he went back in, and then we had to put him on the respirator as he was having trouble breathing. Even with the respirator on, he kept up a stream of talking, not making any sense, as you probably heard there at the end. I know I'm probably repeating myself and telling you things you have heard for yourself. I just want someone besides the 5 of us to understand what happened and how we were involved. Commander Brown says, I understand and will listen at any time. I don't know how much it'll help the doctors, but I will relay every word to them. If at any time you or the other 4 of you need an ear to talk to, I'm always here. Now, you need to get some rest. I'm going to try to stay away from a public announcement with you present, but that's not entirely up to me. Unless you want to meet with the reporters. There was a round of no's. When they left the commander's office, an officer walked up and saluted them. They realized it was Marty, Ted's friend. They went to a little cafe to talk. The first thing he said was, "You look better than when you came off the ship. You look like 5 old men. Does space always age you so much?" They all laughed, and George said, "You should try it sometime. It was a blast." They were all laughing and enjoying a normal conversation. He had been promoted while they were gone. He had also gotten married and had a baby girl named Gail. He seemed so happy. They were happy for him. They made arrangement to get together. They did a few times, then everyone moved on. There was a public news report the next afternoon, sent directly to TV station, newspapers, and all the other news outlets. It read as follows in its entirety. The spaceship with 6 experienced astronauts reached the black hole without incident. Upon going into the black hole, they either hit something or something hit them. It knocked Captain James Allen off his feet. He fell, striking his head on something. He fell into a coma. The crew kept him in the coma until they could get him back here. They turned around immediately, so were unable to see much of the other side. We will be trying again soon. Captain Allen is in the hospital and will remain here until we are sure his brain has healed completely. He will not be seeing visitors for a few days, as he is very weak. We expect him to make a full recovery. It was short and to the point. They were disappointed. They would have liked to have seen more information in the article. They assumed it was because they didn't want anything to get out about the captain's problems and the Blackbird. They still had thoughts of his thinking about the Blackbird. Even though the astronauts were not named, they were hounded for weeks. They answered questions as best they could without giving the details of the captain. At those questions, they just said, "No comment," or "He is healing well." When asked if they would be making the second trip, they just said they would like to, but that it was up to command. There was not another trip in their available time, so they never got the chance again. Captain James Allen recovered, but had no recollection of the time after he got to the black hole. Sometimes he had dreams, nightmares, of a black bird trying to talk to him. He had been told the entire story, so he felt he was just remembering what he was told. Captain James Allen passed away 2.5 years later. It was said that he passed away from natural causes, but the 5 wondered just how true that was. Al decided to train in the medical field of the space program and stay close to the captain. George and Pete got out, and both became commercial pilots. Ted and Greg stayed with the space program and took many trips into space. Both found lovely ladies and got married and had a family. Sometimes they would get together and rehash that space trip. They went to see the captain occasionally, but they were mostly painful visits, as they remembered him when he was a different person. They always left in a sad mood. The captain always talked of the trip and of the bad times he had on the different planets. They had at first tried to correct him, but they were told to just let him talk, as he could saw you go back to the from his dreams.